Hi, everybody. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and watch this presentation today. I'm really excited about the topic, and I'm hoping that you guys will maybe benefit from it and learn some different strategies or techniques in terms of how you approach self-regulation when you're working with students and when you're teaching them ways that they can learn coping techniques or coping skills. So to start off, my name is Amanda Gonzalez, and I'm a school psychologist. I work in the elementary school setting, and I'm actually getting ready to begin my 8th year now as a school psychologist, which is so crazy to say out loud. It feels like just yesterday sometimes I was still a grad student, but throughout the past 7 years, I truly have learned so much. I've grown so much as a school psychologist, and I look forward to continuing to grow and learn, and maybe hopefully someday even connecting with some of you guys and collaborating and learning some ways that you guys teach self-regulation to your students or kids at home. So again, today we're talking about self-regulation, and the purpose of today's presentation is to offer some ideas in terms of how you approach this topic and how to incorporate some activities throughout your school day so that we can help together foster our young learners and their ability to regulate their emotions and their mood in the school setting. So I'm kind of starting a little backwards. I wanted to begin by talking a little bit about the references in today's presentation. So today's presentation is primarily based on this book that you see here. This is called Helping Young People Learn Self-Regulation, and it was written by Brad Chapin and Matthew Penner. And this book, I purchased it at the beginning of the summer, this past summer. I came across it on Amazon and I decided to purchase it. And I have to say, this is a phenomenal book. I, just for the record, have no affiliation with this book. I do not know the authors, but this book is truly amazing, and it really kind of opened up my eyes on the whole topic of self-regulation and how I approach this with students. And it's definitely going to change the way that I incorporate interventions and how I address, strategies with teachers for what they can do to help their students. So this book, the beautiful thing about it is it comes with so many activities and worksheets, and the way that the authors break it down into different categories. And the beautiful thing about the worksheets as well is you get a CD-ROM included in the book, so it's an easy way to copy the reproducibles. You can share it out with the families, teachers. But the other thing that I love about it is that for all of the activities, the authors do a really nice job of breaking down the activities, so explaining sort of the why, the purpose of why you're doing that lesson or resource with the students. But they also give you ideas on how you can differentiate or modify the activity based on your students' needs. So if it's a student that doesn't do so well with worksheets, they give you ways that you can incorporate technology, like using Microsoft Paint or Microsoft Word, using the internet. So there's so much helpful information, and they offer you so many different ways that you can, again, adapt and differentiate the activities for your students. So the book that we're talking about today is, again, the orange one that you see in the center. And this book is designed for students in grades K through 8th grade. I feel like to some extent from an elementary perspective, I think some of the activities might seem a little bit abstract or better suited for the older students versus, when you think kindergarten, first grade. But that's not to say that this book won't be helpful for those of you who are kindergarten and first grade teachers. I think that the information is extremely, extremely relevant and so important. And again, while some of the actual activities, like the worksheets, might be a little beyond a kindergarten student's level, the activity itself, it can easily be differentiated and modified so that you can make it fit your students' needs. But they do also have 2 other books sort of in the series, I guess you could say. There's a book for students in the preschool level, so there's a curriculum guide targeted to the preschool age students. That's the one that you see on the left, that, the cute, colorful, painted hands book. And then on the far right, for those of you who maybe work in a high school setting or teenagers, you could purchase the blue book, which is Helping Teens Learn Self-Regulation Strategies. And again, the beautiful thing about the books is they all come with CD-ROMs, so it makes it really easy to make reproducible copies of the activities for your kids. I also will at times reference the American Psychological Association, as well as this website that I came across, the Glossary of Education Reform. this I thought was a really handy website to have maybe bookmarked on your internet page, because if there's ever a time where maybe you come across some terminology that you might not be familiar with, this is a great resource to kind of build some background knowledge if you want to dive a little deeper and kind of gain a deeper understanding on a topic. And I also wanted to include this quote. So during the summer, I was attending a lot of online webinars and trainings. And one of the trainings that I attended, it was about self-regulation and social emotional learning. And at the end of the presentation, the presenter had this quote with a really cute little image of a cactus asking for hugs. And I thought it was a beautiful analogy that she put together with this, because the quote says, remember, everyone in the classroom has a story that leads to misbehavior or defiance. 9 times out of 10, the story behind the misbehavior won't make you angry, it'll break your heart. And she talked about like a cactus. A cactus is prickly, it has its little thorns, and if you try to hug it, it's going to sting, it's going to hurt. And sometimes that's the kiddos that we work with. If you think about your quote unquote heavy hitters or students that maybe had some challenging behaviors, sometimes those students, they can be sometimes the most difficult students to reach and try to find effective interventions to help them. They're oftentimes the ones that really do need the most love and they need the most support. And as again someone that works in the elementary school, it's very disheartening sometimes when you realize that a student who might be 5, 6, 8 years old, they've already experienced so much in their short amount of life that myself as an adult, I will never be able to fully understand and will never even experience, in my adult life. So this is just a really nice quote, and for me, it's something that I really reflected on and kind of helped shift even my perspective and how I want to choose to move forward in terms of interventions and how I maybe approach a student that has behavioral difficulties, and trying to really sort of, again, bring it back to the whole child and what is that child's experience, what's their background, and what are they lacking, how can we help be facilitators to help them gain the skills that they need to be able to function in the classroom and outside in the in the real world as well. So why self-regulation skills? Why is this important? So the authors talk about self-regulation skills and that it's so important that we as humans develop effective or positive ways to handle stress. If you think about fight or flight or freeze, someone that has adaptive versus maladaptive coping skills really makes a difference in terms of how they receive stressful situations. If you look at the little kind of cute image I put on the page, there's a copy machine and it's out of order. And, I know for those of us that work in a school setting or maybe an office setting, I'm sure we've all come across that dreaded day where you go to use the copier and it's out of order, the machine's broken, someone jammed the machine, and maybe you're on a time crunch and you don't have time to sift through the machine and find where that piece of paper is coming from. But if we think about this example, someone that has effective or positive self-regulation strategies, they're able to handle this in a much different way versus someone with maladaptive coping skills. So adaptive coping skills, you might walk in, you see that the machine is broken, and yes, you feel frustrated, you might be annoyed, like, oh, it's broken again, but you're able to kind of keep your emotions in check, you're able to regulate yourself, maybe take a deep breath, think quickly, okay, what can I do? So thinking higher level, executive functioning skills, impulse control, stop, think, plan, okay, let me take a walk to the other side of the building, I'll see if that machine's working, if not, I'll just change my activity, I'll hold off, I'll do this tomorrow, and the activity I had planned for tomorrow, I'll just do that today. So again, they're able to, although they're maybe stressed and of course frustrated, they can easily modify their behavior and modify their choices to adapt to the situation. Versus someone with maladaptive coping skills, they see the machine's broken and it kind of sends them into a panic or a frenzy. They have increased stress, their anxiety is increasing, they might start pacing back and forth, they can't game plan, they can't come up with an idea, it's the day's ruined, oh no, I don't know what to do, and my activity's ruined for today, I don't have anything else that I can do, so it takes an emotional toll on the person. And, I think we all know that when our stress levels start to rise and become more intense, then of course our ability to cognitively plan, think, our physical reactions, those take a spike too, and you experience more of an emotional toll. The authors, so Brad Chapin and Matthew Penner, they break down self regulation into what they call 8 assumptions. And in the book, in the beginning, when you start to read it, they talk a lot about how when we think about what is self-regulation, it's so much more of a broader term. It's so much more than just impulse control, inhibition. It's more than just when you think about a student with ADHD who is restless and can't sit still. There's a lot to it. And this book is so eye-opening because sometimes while you might be doing some of these strategies or some of these skills, you almost don't realize how much goes into self-regulation. And so again, they break it into 8 principles that, as they were doing their research, they found these principles align really well with cognitive behavioral psychology, which we'll kind of get in a little bit more later on in the presentation. But I wanted to start off the presentation by talking about those 8 assumptions that the authors talk about, because I think that it's really important and it sort of sets the framework behind self-regulation. So the first assumption is the idea that children will do well if they can. And the authors talk a lot about we as the adults, our job or our responsibility is not meant to control the child. We're not there to be controlling and sort of telling them what they need to be doing. Rather, our role really is meant to help them grow. So think about it as though you're a navigator. You're helping them navigate their feelings. You're helping them navigate the stressful situation. You're helping to foster their own ability to build self-regulation strategies. The second assumption is on the idea of calmness, but physical calmness. And if you purchase this book and as you read it, you'll see how important this really is, because in order to be able to engage in any type of intervention and for any intervention to be successful, whether it's an academic intervention, a behavioral intervention, for the student to be able to learn and receive what you're trying to teach them, they need to be physically calm, right? So if you think about a student in your classroom or in your counseling group who is extremely restless, maybe a little out of control, kind of wound up where their body's moving throughout the group, and you have to constantly be trying to circle them back and bring them back to the table or the activity, they might not be taking in the information as much as they should be. If they were physically calm, then they're able to receive what you're trying to teach them. So, past studies have shown that higher level brain function, so those kind of higher level skills, do become impaired and they are impacted when we're experiencing emotional distress. So if you have a child that's having a temper tantrum, they're out of control, if you're trying to teach them a strategy or an intervention in that moment, they're probably not receiving it, and it's going to just lead in the end to frustration on both the child and the adult's end, and kind of it's going to be really taxing for you. So the authors note that this whole idea about your kind of brain functions and your higher level thinking skills decreasing as your anxiety and stress level increase, the same is true not just for us adults, but it's also true for children as well. So the third assumption is focused on locus of control. So locus of control, right, is the idea that we have little control over our environment, but we do have control over how we choose to respond to what's happening around us. So the authors talked about how oftentimes the way that we perceive the actual event itself is oftentimes more powerful than what's actually taking place. And it really struck with me when I read that in the book, because as myself, I'm huge on the idea of reflection. I like, to try my best to reflect on my day, what was good about my day, what can I do differently to improve tomorrow. But I also was reflecting on my year, and it made me think of a moment where, a student was having a huge behavioral episode and they were really upset about something, and as an outsider to me and talking with the teacher, gaining a deeper understanding of what the problem was, the problem itself was so minuscule, it was so small, but when you think about it from that student's perspective, it was a huge problem, it was a huge ordeal. And it's so true that how you perceive the event is usually much more powerful than what's actually happening. So, keeping with locus of control, again, the idea of how strongly you believe that you have control over situations or experiences that you might come across throughout your lifetime. Within education, we oftentimes refer to this as a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. There's other terms too. If you're familiar with the Superflex curriculum, they use unthinkables and the superhero character Superflex, who he's able to adapt. He's flexible thinking skills. He can like reason and take a step back and problem solve. Versus in the book, or in the program of Superflex, they have what's called unthinkables. So those are more the fixed mindset ways of thinking, and unthinkables are characters that they kind of get stuck in your head, and um, they make you react negatively or think negatively. So there's a bunch of different ones. There's one called Energy Harry, who she makes you have a lot of energy. Brain Eater, I believe he's the one that kind of makes you think about other things than what's happening in that moment. There's Glassman, who makes you have huge upset reactions to small problems, and kind of the more common one, Rock Brain, who makes you get stuck on your ideas and you get upset if you don't get your way. So those are just a few examples of, in the school, at least in the elementary school setting, how you might talk to kids about a growth and a fixed mindset. Just as a side note, a helpful resource would be, there's a really great book written by an author named Julia Cook. You can find all of her books on Amazon, and some of her books also, they sell teacher guides, so kind of activity guides of different things you can do related to the book, different crafts or activities for the students. But one of my favorite books that I love to use for classroom lessons and counseling groups is her book called Bubblegum Brain. So there's the character who's bubblegum, and he's the flexible growth mindset thinker. He believes in perseverance, the power of yet. He talks about, mistakes are not a negative thing, rather mistakes are good because they help you grow, they help you learn. Versus the other character in the book, who's a brick brain, he's more the fixed mindset thinker. He doesn't want to try new things. If he does well in something, that's kind of where he stops, and he doesn't kind of want to try risking taking those chances of trying something new, because if you try something new, you might fail. So they rather, someone with a brick brain way of thinking, rather just kind of plateau, stop at where they're at and not risk trying something new. So again, someone with a growth mindset, a student that has an internal locus of control, that might be someone that has a little bit more positive self-esteem. They see achievements and failures as a reflection of the amount of effort that they put into something. So let's take the example of a quiz or test at school. If someone has an internal locus of control, and let's say they failed a test or they didn't do as well as they would have liked, they're not going to get upset. They're not going to, while they might be disappointed, they're going to take it in, and they're going to kind of process it and say to themselves, you know what, I didn't study as hard as I could have. Maybe next time, instead of waiting the night before, I'm going to break up my studying over the course of time, and I'll spend 10, 15 minutes each night studying. So for them, they're very reflective, and someone with an internal locus of control, they're going to take more ownership, and they're going to use this as a life lesson, a learning opportunity to think, what can I do different next time? So the opposite is true for somebody with an external locus of control. Someone that has an external locus of control, that's more of a fixed mindset thinker. So they might be a little more negative. They're someone that they're going to see achievements or failures as something that's outside of their control. So if they do well on something, oh, it was just a lucky day, or it was a lucky guess. She felt bad for me. She gave me a good grade just because, or, I'm not smart enough to get an A. So that's more their mindset. So if they do poorly on a test, there's no ownership. There's no self-reflection. There's no, what could I have done differently? Rather, they're going to blame outside factors. Oh, the teacher doesn't like me. The test was stupid. Oh, she graded too hard on the test. So again, there's no ownership on the person themselves. Rather, it's outside factors. So this is just a cute little diagram that I came across. I included the link on the bottom left corner. So it's a resource that I found on Pinterest. Pinterest and Teachers Pay Teachers are tremendous resources, as I'm sure many of you know. You can find so many helpful visuals and activities for students. So I kind of modified this and adapted it to fit sort of the purpose of the presentation today. But this is a resource which it's a really helpful visual, and I actually have used something similar to this with students in the past, like some of my fifth graders, to help them understand the idea of things they control versus things they cannot control. So if you look at this, the small circle on the inside, the light purple circle, those are a reflection of things that I have control over. So I can control my words, I can control my actions, my behavior. I have control over how much or how little effort I choose to put into something, versus the dark circle, the dark purple circle on the outside. That's a reflection of an external locus of control. So these are things that I cannot control. I do not have control over other people's actions. I cannot control somebody else's mistakes. I can't control someone else's words or their behavior, but I do have control over myself. Again, I can control how I choose to respond to that person or how I choose to react to a situation. And, there's so much research out there and studies that have shown, regardless of your locus of control, whether you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, whatever your mindset is or your way of thinking is, it really truly does play such a critical role in terms of your motivation, how much effort you put into something, in terms of academic success, achievements, persistence, perseverance. And I strongly believe that it's so important that we start incorporating this ideology or this way of thinking with students, maybe even as young as preschool, as they're growing up, definitely in kindergarten, first grade, throughout elementary school. It's so important. And it's so easy when you take the time to think about it. You can easily incorporate this with students, model what it means to have a growth mindset, model what it means if you make a mistake, if you're practicing something new in math, model for the kids. This is really hard, but we're going to persevere. We're going to take positive risks. We're going to try. Don't give up. If you make a mistake, I love making mistakes. The mistakes help me grow. It teaches me something. I learn what to do different next time. And it's so important that we instill this concept with kids from a young age, because it really does. It sets a framework for how they're going to do for the rest of their life in school, middle school, high school, in the workforce. So it's so important. The fourth assumption is on relationships, and I'm sure this is not the first time you've heard this, but relationships are so important in school. If you think about real estate, they say, what are the three most important things about real estate? Location, location, location. Well, what are the three most important things about education, about school? Relationships, relationships, relationships. So if you want to instill positive change in a person, you need to have that relationship with them. And you need to help them feel connected to you, share with them about you, who you are, learn about them, ask them questions. And it really does make an important difference, especially when we're talking about behaviors and making effective change with students in terms of interventions. So I love this quote. This is a quote from Jane Evans, and it says, "When a child can't calm down, they need connection and comfort, not criticism and control." So when a child is in distress and feeling upset about something, maybe emotional about something, the last thing they need is criticism. We're not there to ridicule. We're not there to try to control them, which, again, I love this quote because it kind of circles back to what we talked about in the beginning, which was self-regulation. Our role is not to control the child, but rather be facilitators, nurturers, guide them, help them navigate how to handle their emotions. So again, relationships are so important. They need connection, and that goes a long way. Relationships are so essential, if not one of the most important variables in helping to motivate someone else to want to change. The fifth assumption that the authors talk about in the book is cognitive behavioral psychology, and that, of course, there's so much research out there that shows that cognitive behavioral psychology is, in fact, effective in helping individuals to change their mood and their behaviors. So what is cognitive behavioral psychology? Also referred to as cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. So this is just a very, very brief outline or of the framework of CBT, but CBT is the idea that our thoughts affect our feelings impact our behavior, and our behavior in turn affects our thoughts and what we think. So again, CBT, it works, it's effective, and strategies related to CBT have been shown to help people improve their mood and shift their way of thinking. So, if you come across someone that's a fixed mindset or a negative thinker, a brick brain person, it's not an end all be all. It is possible to shift your mindset, to shift your negative thinking and kind of become more of a positive thinker. And, we do have the ability to shift our mindsets and become more flexible in our thinking. The sixth assumption is the idea of self-regulation, and that it is effective and it's critical in terms of one's success and happiness. And individuals who have effective and healthy self-regulation skills, they oftentimes tend to do a better job of handling challenges that come their way. They have more positive, more effective, adaptive ways of coping with stress versus someone that does not have the positive strategies. The seventh assumption is that we need to meet children where they're at. So meeting them at their level of functioning is so important, and this is true for any intervention, any strategy, whether it's academic, behavioral. Think about if you're doing a reader's workshop, a guided reading group. When we have guided reading groups, we divvy up our students based on their level, their abilities. So a student that has a hard time with fluency and rate, or has a hard time with decoding, you're not going to expect that student to read a Harry Potter chapter book, right? So we make our groups based on what their independent reading level is, their instructional reading level is, and the same goes for behavioral interventions. You need to meet your students where they're at, because if you're trying to go in when a child is having a tantrum and now you're trying to teach them a strategy that maybe they've never experienced or they're not familiar with, in the end, it's just going to lead to frustration and failure on both parties, on the child and the student and the adult, to help the student kind of regulate their emotions. So the eighth assumption, the final assumption that the authors talk about, is assumptions. Don't assume. So it's so important that we don't assume children have learned anything about how to regulate their behaviors and manage their emotions. And even though a child may have had a fantastic teacher the year before who taught them so many coping tools, strategies, think about the summer. Academics, children sometimes they sort of regress, and when they come back to school in the fall, they might have lost some of those skills that they ended off with at the end of the school year, and you have to almost sometimes start back at square one and kind of reteach them and kind of build them back up to where they were. And the same is true for behavioral interventions. Unfortunately, many of the students that we might come across or work with have never been taught or never been exposed to a positive strategy of how to regulate their emotions or their mood. Sometimes for students within the home setting, maladaptive strategies are effective ways to be heard. Maybe for some students, the only way they can get their way or be heard at home is to raise their voice, to yell, scream, maybe throwing something is the only way to get somebody's attention. So it's so important that we don't make assumptions. And there's a really fantastic book. I don't know the name of the authors off the top of my head, but the title of the book, I believe it's called The First 6 Weeks of School. And I love this book because it does such a great job of talking about how, the beginning of the school year should be less focused on academics as much as it should be focusing on building a classroom climate and creating the culture of what your expectations are in the classroom. That's really the time where you develop that relationship with the students, you build a family atmosphere, and you set the tone for what it's going to be like for the rest of the year. The students will learn during those first 6 weeks of school, is this going to be a safe environment where I can make a mistake and be nurtured and kind of learn from these experiences? Or they're going to feel like I can't speak up, I'm afraid to even try, because if I try and I'm wrong, I'm going to get yelled at and kind of belittled. So this is really a critical time in all of those things related to setting expectations, building relationships with your students. And I love that book, so it's definitely worth reading or checking out if you guys maybe have never read the book before. So again, it's called The First 6 Weeks of School. But child engagement is a huge part in the success of any intervention. So going back to relationships, it's going to be so important. So the authors, they break down self-regulation into what they call three effective skill sets or areas for self-regulation. So the first being calming the body. So in order for any intervention to be effective, the child needs to have a calm body. They need to be able to express their emotions appropriately. So learning how to do that, what does that look like, what does that mean, and how to moderate their thoughts. So how to become effective problem solvers and make healthy choices in handling stressful situations. So there's three core categories, or what the authors refer to as three functional categories of self-regulation, and those are physical, emotional, and cognitive. And the order that you see them in here is so important, and the authors throughout the book are emphasizing constantly how important it is that we organize self-regulation in these categories, and they talk in depth about why this is so important. So we're going to get started and talk about physical strategies and why. Why are physical strategies the most important part of self-regulation, and why do these need to be taught first? So for any intervention to be successful, in again, behavioral or academic, the child must be calm. Think about fight or flight response. Again, if a child is in distress, they're not going to be receiving the help or the intervention that you're trying to teach them in that moment. So being calm is a huge part in whether or not it's going to be successful. And it's so important that we practice these skills with our students when they're in a low stressful situation. So some of the ways to incorporate physical strategies is through repetitive movements. So you want to think about like building muscle memory. You want to be doing this repetitively. Incorporate these strategies or these techniques throughout your school day, throughout your week, throughout the month, throughout the whole school year. And definitely you have so many valuable people in your school building who are experts in different areas and can offer their expertise. So this might be a perfect time to reach out to your physical education teacher, the gym teacher, and ask for their input. So one example that they give in the book to build that major muscle activity is doing things like bouncing a ball. So things sports, basketball, soccer, having the students in the classroom. You could do this easily by, taking a soft little ball and maybe when you're asking students to respond to questions, you could use it and toss the student the ball. They have to catch it, answer the question, and then toss it back to you. So that's just one kind of simple example, but bouncing a ball is a great way to build the major muscle movements. Practice regulation of breathing. This again is so important in building a physical strategy to help self-regulation is deep breathing exercises. You can do this so easily throughout your school day. Maybe before you introduce a new activity or as you're transitioning, take a mindful moment with the kids. Have everyone sit, kind of rest in your nest, take a deep breath in, show them, model for them what that looks like, how to do it the right way. Of course, you're going to have the students that are silly who start like pretending to hyperventilate and do, quick breathing through their mouth and everything, but those are learning opportunities. So kind of capitalize on that moment and say, well, I want you to try it again. Watch me. This is how you do it the right way. If you want, close your eyes. You can leave your eyes open, whatever is more comfortable for you. I'm going to take a deep breath in through our nose, hold it, and then take a deep breath out through our mouth. A quiet breath where you're not hearing it, and practice. Show the students, ask them to notice, like, what do you notice about me when I do it? Now you try. And again, this is a great way to do this. There's another super resource that I love. It's called Yoga for Classrooms. And I use this program in my building with my students as well. And I do a lot of classroom lessons. So sometimes the beautiful thing about that program is there's a set of yoga cards and they break it into different categories. So there's imagination vacation cards, there's breathing cards, yoga, like body movement activities, which is great. And we practice these. So when I go into a classroom, I'll bring a couple cards with me. So each week I might bring one specific card and I'll teach it to the students, and then the classroom teacher kind of carries over and she'll reiterate that activity throughout the week and practice with the students. So for one of them, we practiced taking what's called a peaceful breath. And before I started my classroom lesson, we talk about, okay, like everybody sit tall in your chair, like a sitting mountain, and I'll read the card to them, we practice it. And it's really cute when students continue to practice this and the teacher continues it, because next time when I come in and we're reflecting, I might ask, what did we do last time? Who remembers that new strategy we learned? And the kids will remember it. And in my building, we do zones of regulation. So all of the teachers have the zones poster, and each week, as we learn a new coping tool or toolbox strategy, we add it to the list, and the students can add it to their own little journals, their folders that they keep on zones. So that's just a really easy, natural way that you can incorporate it in your day. Another strategy is redirection or distraction, and I promise you this will be your best friend. I love this strategy. It's teaching the students how to leave a stressful situation, and I've used this so many times. Just kind of a silly example, but hopefully a helpful example, is this past school year, I had a kindergarten student that I worked with who oftentimes had some behavioral difficulties in the classroom. What did it look like? It'd be running around the room, jumping, hiding, ducking under tables. Of course, it's not safe because he could fall, he could hurt himself, he might hurt another student. But one day I went in and the student was running around the room, and of course, I'm trying different strategies and nothing seems to be working. Then the student runs underneath the table. So now I'm literally on the floor under the table looking at the student. And of course, in that moment, trying to talk to the student about why this was unsafe. You're not following the rules. You're not showing whole body listening. It looks like you don't have whole body listening with the teacher right now. I notice everyone's at the carpet. Of course, I could have approached it that way, but that wasn't going to do me any favors. It was probably going to aggravate the student more. So instead, I used the power of distraction. I quickly thought on my feet and I was like, okay, Pokemon. So I asked him if he ever heard of Pokemon, and of course that got his attention, and he looked at me and I was telling him like, oh, I love Pokemon. And this is where it helps to have a nephew that is obsessed with Pokemon as well. So I talked to him about my nephew who loves Pokemon, and I asked him who's his favorite. And so I had my phone, and of course, I knew in this area in the building that my cell service does not work there. But I took my phone and I said, oh, let me show you mine. And I was trying to pretend like I was trying to get onto the internet and it wasn't working. So I told him like to come out with me, and that I would show him who my favorite Pokemon is. So now he came out from under the table, and I said, oh, my internet's not working here. Let's go take a walk. You want to come with me for a walk? And I'll tell you who my favorite Pokemon is. So he took my hand, and now we went out into the classroom. So this is a perfect way to distract, but also leave the stressful situation. So the classroom in that moment was a stressful situation for him. The student did not want any part in the activity. It was disruptive to the rest of the class. So now we're taking space. So we went out into the hallway. We're taking a movement break. So we're going for a little walk. We found a table that was empty. We sat down and started talking about Pokemon. So now the student is distracted. I'm also connecting. I'm building a relationship with the student because we're sharing our interest, and I'm asking him questions. He's asking me questions. So now he's building a little bit of trust with me as well. So it kind of served multiple purposes. But also, the student is now physically calm. So now that he's physically calm, I can revisit why I went down there in the first place. So now this opened up a new dialogue of, I noticed that your friends were at the carpet, but your body was away from the group. You were running around the room. And well, that's unexpected behavior, because expected behavior is that we have a safe body, our bodies are calm, we're walking, what could happen if you were running. And of course, now we talk about what could have happened. He could have hurt himself, he could have hurt somebody else. And how does this make your teacher feel? So we incorporate a little bit of perspective taking and how others might be scared of that type of a behavior. And then we talk about expected. What do you need to do? Why were you upset? So now we're incorporating emotions. He's expressing to me why he was upset, what happened. We talked about it. We problem solved together. We helped come up with a solution. And now I know he's ready, and we reintegrate him back into the classroom. So you could see how something as simple as distraction and removing yourself from the stressful situation actually has such a profound impact on what was happening in that moment. Another area of physical strategies is bilateral stimulation of the brain. And again, this is where connecting with your occupational therapists or maybe physical therapists in your building can be so helpful, and they can help offer ideas. So you want to engage activities, or you want to incorporate activities that engage both sides of the brain. So thinking about like uncrossing your arms and legs, sort of crossing midline. Um, Things like, I don't know if you've maybe heard of crazy eights, those, or lazy eights, those are really helpful. It's literally a number 8 on its side, and you have the student kind of trace the 8 back and forth in a certain direction. And what you do with one side, you want them to again do with the other side, so they take the opposite hand and do it. And you don't necessarily need a physical paper. They can, trace it in the sky, on their desk, maybe in their hands. But this is a great way to kind of center and sort of help with the stimulating both sides of the brain. So again, reach out to those in your building. There's so many people that have so many valuable resources. Within the actual book, again, the orange book, the one on self-regulation by Brad Chapin and Matthew Penner, these are some of the examples that they provide you with. So if you purchase the book, you'll actually get the reproducibles and worksheets for each of these activities. And again, the authors do a phenomenal job of breaking down sort of an understanding of what the purpose of this activity is, sort of what the students are gaining from it. So they talk about cooling our anger flame, take a hike, melting freeze, which is focusing on muscle relaxation techniques, warning signs of anger. This is focusing on body sensations, so helping the students to recognize, of course, again, when they're physically calm and it's a low stressful situation, you're helping the students think about a time that you were mad or when you felt nervous. What did your body feel like? And talk to them about those sensations. You might feel a racing heart. Maybe you feel a change in your temperature. You get cold, you get hot. Does your head ever feel fuzzy, like cloudy? You can't really think straight. So those are just some examples, distinguishing between a safe and unsafe space. And the authors do a really good job of talking about how important it is that we don't instill in children or tell them what a safe place might look like for them, because what we might think a safe place is as maybe when you're home, maybe your bedroom is a safe place. But for a child who maybe experienced a trauma and maybe that trauma occurred in their bedroom, then that for them, that might not be a safe space. So it's really important that you let the child take the lead on this when you're drafting up like ideas or a list. And of course, yoga activities, practicing stretches, those are all great ways to incorporate physical strategies. I don't know if you've heard of a website called Go Noodle, but that's a fantastic website where there's so many resources and perfect strategies to incorporate the physical components. And you can share this out with parents as well, because I believe parents can also make an account for themselves. So you can, again, bridge homeschool connection. But you also want to be mindful of the strategies you pick. So if you have a student that is really restless, then you probably don't want to do an activity on Go Noodle where it's a dance that they're singing a silly song and doing silly dances, because you're only going to help sort of exacerbate that restlessness in the child. Rather, you want to make sure to pick an activity that's calming. And I love Go Noodle because there's a monkey who he does yoga, and it's like this purple monkey, and you can have the kids practice the yoga, and it's nice, it's relaxing, it's calm. I love the take a hike activity in the book. That the purpose of that activity is teaching students the benefits of just walking away and teaching them how valuable that can be versus engaging in the confrontation. So again, the book has so many helpful reproducibles that will certainly do a fantastic job of helping you come up with lessons and activities for your students. So these are some sayings or terms that I use with students in my building, and I find it so helpful. So anytime that I'm going into a classroom to do a lesson or I have a small group in front of me, I always tell the students to scan their bodies. So I tell them, scan your body, and I kind of compare it to like an x-ray, and we talk about what is an x-ray. It helps you see the inside of your body, and I'll tell the students, I want you to scan your body. So go through your brain and think from your head to your toes, what does your body look like right now? Is it out of control? Are you in the green zone? Is your body ready to learn? If not, I want you to think of a toolbox strategy. What do you need right now to help you? And kind of circling back to those yoga for classroom cards, it's cute because as the year goes on, the students remember it if you practice it enough with them, and the students will say, oh, I think we should take a peaceful breath. And I love to highlight that and say, that's a fantastic idea. I think that, why don't we all do that? Let's all rest in our nest, sit tall like a mountain, take a deep breath, and we practice. Like, if you want, you can keep your eyes open or closed. Take a deep breath, calm your body. And it's just a great way to kickstart what your expectations are for that time, but also help the students relax, and you're modeling for them too. So they're seeing you practice that skill. And again, I always incorporate whole body listening. So I'll ask them, do you have whole body listening? Show me, what does that look like? Is your brain thinking about what the speaker is saying? If your brain's thinking about what you're going to play at recess, then I think that means maybe you need to use a toolbox strategy and get yourself back to the green zone. So those are just some helpful, kind of cute terms that I like to use. And the classroom teachers that I work with, they also incorporate those in their own daily language with the kids, so the kids are hearing it from multiple people, and it's a great way to normalize and kind of reiterate some of the rules that you might have. So now we're going to go into emotional strategies. So for emotional strategies, it's so important, and the authors talk about how important it is that students develop an understanding of the concept that they, in fact, do have control over how they choose to react. They have control over how they choose to express their emotions. So emotional strategies overall is focused on the idea of control. And again, you want to make sure that you're practicing these skills with the students naturally throughout their school day. And the authors are very keen to make the point that before you can even tackle an emotional regulation strategy or skill, you need to have the physical strategies first. So you can't skip ahead to any of the others before you tackle physical strategies. So emotional strategies, again, you need to practice it when the child is physically calm, because if you think about a child that's in distress, having a meltdown, and now's the time that you're trying to choose to teach them a new strategy, you're probably not going to be effective, and it's going to frustrate the child, and you're going to be frustrated. So always make sure that if they're not regulated and the child is upset, always use a physical strategy to kind of return them, think back to baseline, return them back to a neutral state, that then you can move on to the next phase of interventions. So to have emotional well-being, children, they need to have effective self-regulation skills. This is so important. And it's so important that we teach our students, how to communicate effectively. So thinking about labeling your emotions, they need to build that emotional vocabulary. And it's so easy to do this. I don't want anyone to think of this as something extra, something added in your day that now you have to incorporate something else that you weren't planning to, because you can do this naturally. So model for the students, maybe talk about your day, do a morning check-in with them, have a morning meeting, and have the kids go around and share something about their morning that went well, maybe something that was stressful. You could say, oh my goodness, today Miss G was so frustrated because I went to turn on my car and my car wouldn't turn on, or I ran out of coffee this morning and I didn't have time to go to the store and get some, or to stop at Dunkin' Donuts, so I was feeling really frustrated and tired, maybe exhausted. And as you build these words and as you introduce new vocabulary to your students, this would be a perfect time to incorporate an emotional word wall with the kids. Maybe in Reader's Workshop, if you're reading a book, take a few extra seconds, stop at a new word that you're introducing, and ask the kids, like, why don't we look this up in our dictionary together? And have them add it to maybe their classroom dictionaries or in their desks, maybe even, dare I say, a thesaurus, if anyone knows what those are anymore, but have them look up other words that mean the same thing, and now they're expanding their horizon of words and what they mean. And an emotional vocabulary is so important, and you can incorporate this not just in reading and putting it up on a wall, but incorporate it in writing. Have the kids focus on that word for the week, and maybe tell the kids, for creative writing today, I want you to write a story where you use this word and make the character have this emotion, have this feeling, and have the kids explore that in their creative writing as well. But it's so important, because there's more to feelings than just happy, sad, mad, right? Mad, well, yeah, mad is a feeling, it's an emotion that we have, but there's a spectrum of mad, right? I could be feeling annoyed, I could be feeling grumpy, I could be mad, I could be furious, I could be enraged, I could be out of control. Like, mad is a spectrum, and it's important that students understand that, and that they start to develop that understanding from a young age in elementary school, and building that vocabulary, because those different phases of anger or mad, sad, annoyed, frustrated, those are critical parts in helping students identify how they're feeling, but also how to respond to that emotion. So again, it's easy to incorporate this in your school day. It's important that you incorporate this in your school day naturally for the students when they're physically calm. So you can do this through morning check-ins, read aloud, discussions, talking about how the character's feeling, modeling yourself to the students, how to express their emotions. But it's also important that we help students rate the intensity of the emotions. So again, emotional vocabulary, building the understanding that mad isn't just mad, but there's a spectrum of mad. That's huge in helping students be able to label how they're feeling. And this is going to serve so many purposes because, again, in my building, we do zones of regulation. If a child tells me that they're in the blue zone because they're feeling maybe sad or maybe they're bored, I'm probably going to handle that and address that problem that they might have differently than if they're to tell me that they're in the red zone because they're out of control or they're really angry, right? So rating emotions, it helps show the progress of the calming process, but it serves multiple purposes because it's giving you as the adult valuable information. You're learning so much about the child when they rate their emotion. You're learning, okay, where are they now? How are they feeling after we used a strategy? Are they ready to reintegrate back into the classroom? And if not, maybe they need more time to sit in the calm down corner, or maybe they need more time to take space to themselves to put their head down. So this is going to be valuable for you. And for me, sometimes when I help out a student, I might use that strategy of distraction. We might take the strategy of let's go take space, kind of remove ourselves from the situation. So sometimes we'll go to my office and I'll kind of model for the students, I could tell you're feeling really upset. What zone were you in today? And let's say they tell me I'm in the red zone. I was really angry. So I'll tell them, okay, why don't you take some space? You can sit at my table. You could put your head down if you want. You can use one of my toolbox strategies, and I have things like glitter jars, stress balls, kinetic sand. I have so many different things that they can use in my office. They could draw a picture if they wanted to, but I'll tell them, put your head down if you want. You can take 5 minutes to yourself or 3 minutes to yourself. And I'll usually tell them that I'll set a timer for the 3 minutes, and then once the timer goes off, I'll ask them, that's the time where we can talk, and we learn a little bit more about, well, what was happening, how were you feeling before you were in the red zone, well, how do you feel now? And oftentimes they'll say, well, I feel better now. I'm in the yellow zone, or maybe now I'm in the green zone. I feel calm, I feel relaxed. So this is almost like a progression. It showed me that the child went from a high level of stress, now they're feeling relaxed. We can talk about the problem, talk about what happened. We can use executive functioning. We can come up with a plan. We can brainstorm. We can shift our way of thinking, maybe incorporate some perspective taking. How do you think your behavior or what happened? How do you think the other kids felt? How do you think the teacher felt? How do you feel? And now we can come up with a solution. And now I know if they're calm and they're telling me that they're in the green zone, well, now I know they're ready to go back to class. And some easy ways that you can incorporate this as well is, of course, in the elementary school, sometimes we have students that, for whatever reason, have a stronger connection to teachers from the past, maybe their second grade teacher or last year's teacher. And, we sometimes will brainstorm in meetings and come up with proactive strategy plans where we'll have the student, part of the plan is if the student is experiencing extreme discomfort or distress in that moment, then sort of an opt-out or an opportunity for that student to take space. They can go to that previous teacher's classroom and maybe take their work with them and spend 5 minutes working on their math worksheet or doing their writing activity in the other teacher's classroom. And then once they're calm, then they can reintegrate back into their regular classroom, and the teacher will call and let them know so-and-so is on the way, or if support staff's with them, the support staff will walk them back to the classroom. So there's a lot of ways that you can incorporate this into your school day. So these are just a few examples of how you can use rating systems with your students. So they're super simple. They don't have to be difficult. You could do something like a Likert scale, or excuse me, make a scale of 0 to 5, and the student can kind of color or rate, like I'm feeling a level 1, I'm a level 5. You could use emojis. The student can point, circle, or tell you I'm this one I feel calm, relaxed, or I'm this one on the bottom, I'm really angry. Again, zones of regulation. You have your 4 zones: blue, green, yellow, and red. Excuse me, I'll take a drink of water. But within these 4 zones, there's different emotions that make up each category. And just a side note, it's so important that we don't ever tell the child or tell students that there's any wrong emotion or there's any wrong feeling, because no emotion or feeling is ever wrong. It's so important that we constantly are normalizing feelings for the kids and letting them know it's okay to be mad. I don't know anyone who's never not been mad at least once in their lifetime, right? Like, we all get mad, we all get frustrated about something, and that's okay. So it's not a bad thing to feel mad, but what matters is how we react to when we feel mad, how we respond to that feeling. Another example, you could do something like a forecast, a weather forecast, and I thought this was so cute, and I've seen things similar to this on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers, but you could have the kids talk about how they're feeling based on weather, like, I'm having a sunny day feeling, or I'm having a cloudy, I feel stormy on the inside. And this is super cute too if you're a science teacher, or if you're incorporating like lessons on weather with kids like in kindergarten. Maybe for that week you could change your emotions, check in with the kids, and do it through sort of a weather forecast. So you can easily incorporate obviously science and math into all of these as well, which is kind of nice. Another strategy that you can use is talking to kids about the size of the problem and the size of the reaction. So ideally, the size of the reaction should match the level of the problem that the child's experiencing. And what I love about this chart is it's a visual and it helps make it concrete for the students. So I use this all the time. I have it in my office. All of our classroom teachers in my building have calming corners in their rooms, or meditation stations, chill zones. Everybody calls it something different, but most of our teachers have this visual in their space as well, and they use it with the kids. I use it all the time with students, where if, let's say, a child's upset and they're having a temper tantrum because Susie broke their favorite pencil, we will use this chart, and it does help when it's in color, but we'll kind of look at it and say, okay, well, you were really angry and you were yelling, you were screaming because Susie broke your pencil. So let's look. It looks like you were having a level 5 reaction. But when we look at the problem, what was the problem? Your pencil broke. Was that an emergency? No. Were you in danger? No. So the size of your reaction, it doesn't match the size of your problem, but maybe you feel a little upset, so that's more of a level 2 problem. So this is it's a perfect way to kind of concretely explain to students the importance of reactions and problems, and that the two they should match. So when we think about coping tools are so much more than just taking a deep breath and counting to 10. It's when you really stop and think about it, even you yourself, and you think about, well, what are things that help make me feel better? You almost have an endless list, and you realize that there's so many strategies out there, that's so many ways that help you when you feel stressed or frustrated about something. And if we think about coping tools and you break it down into 3 categories, you can break it down into sensory tools, calming tools, and what are called thinking tools. So this is a list I put together. It looks like a lot, but I feel like it's such a small list compared to all of the coping tools that we, in fact, really have access to. And again, so for the tools, some of the tools do overlap. So a sensory tool can also be a calming tool, and vice versa. A calming tool can be a sensory tool. And some examples of sensory tools are, think about like 5 senses. So things that you can touch or taste, smell, hear. So listening to music, playing with sand, sports, playing video games, coloring, bouncing on a ball, using a glitter jar. For calming tools, you can practice things, of course, like deep breathing, muscle relaxation, what it means to take space, talk to a friend, talk to an adult, maybe doing some journal writing, using a puzzle, or putting together a puzzle. And then thinking strategies are things like teaching students what it means to have positive self-talk. So positive thinking, thinking of a happy memory, going back to the size of the problem, thinking about the size of the problem, and does my reaction match the size of the problem? And there's a great creator on Instagram, and Teachers Pay Teachers. Her name is Pathways to Success, and she has on her Teachers Pay Teachers page I'm not sure if it's still free, but I know in the past it was a free resource that you can download and print, and it has, I want to say it's like 100 coping tools on it, and it's such an awesome resource. And I've actually used this a lot of times with students in my counseling groups. So what I'll do is I'll print it out for one for each student, and I'll give them a highlighter and have them go through the list, and the students will highlight what are things that they think will actually help them, what has helped them in the past. And we hold on to this list, and sometimes when I've worked with a student, if I get called to the classroom because they might be having some difficulties, or we're talking about an event earlier in the day that was upsetting to them, we'll pull out the list and we look at what were some things that they highlighted. And sometimes I'll write it down on a sticky note and I'll give it to them, and we'll put it on their desk in the classroom. I'll make a copy for the classroom teacher. I'll send a copy home for the parents. So everybody is aware of what are some toolbox strategies or coping tools that are going to help that student. And it's just a helpful resource. So again, Pathways to Success, and it's the 2 is spelled as a number 2, so it's Pathways number 2 Success. And definitely follow her Instagram page because she offers so many helpful resources on social emotional learning. So again, for emotional strategies to be effective and for students to have healthy ways to express their emotions, kind of circling back to what we talked about in the beginning, they need to be physically calm. Students need to have that ability or the skill set to express their emotions in a healthy way. So we need to develop an emotional vocabulary for our students, build their language skills. That's so important because it's going to help them express themselves, but also for you as the adult, it'll help give you an indicator of how you need to approach the situation and offer them ideas on how to handle those feelings. And then they need to have the ability to moderate how they express their feelings. So how to do so in a positive way that's going to be effective and helpful. And when you think about it, emotional strategies, it actually encompasses a lot of executive functioning skills. So there's a lot of planning that goes into it, organizing. There's a lot of metacognition, thinking about your own thinking, taking perspective. So perspective taking, having empathy, understanding how your behavior affects somebody else and how it might make them feel. So kind of going back to CBT, our thoughts affect our emotions, and then our emotions in turn affect our behavior or how we act to a situation. So again, going back to the book that we're talking about for today's presentation by Chapman and Penner, these are some of the examples in the book that they give you actual reproducibles for that are specific to emotional strategies. So they have Can't Make Me Laugh activity, a feelings clip art, emotional safe, and I love these because the Can't Make Me Laugh activity, that one is really cute. It would be a super cute activity to do with students in the classroom or in a small group setting. So the idea behind this is really to help strengthen for students the concept that they have control over how they react to a situation. So for this activity, the goal is you have one person kind of being a class clown, being silly, and their role is to try to make the other person laugh. And then the task or the activity is that the other person has to try to remain neutral. You have to try to keep your composure. You can't laugh. You have to try to maintain a straight face. So for this one, the students, you're teaching them how to have that self-control, right? And again, the authors do an awesome job of giving you other ways to adapt. So they kind of take the guesswork out of it for you, and they tell you that if you don't feel comfortable acting or if the students are uncomfortable role-playing, you could pull up some funny images or play some funny YouTube videos for the kids on the computer. But the nice thing too is you can easily incorporate journaling in this as well, because maybe the authors talk about how you want to keep practicing with the same visuals, the same videos. So you want to use those throughout the whole entire week with the student, or as long as you're practicing the strategy. So let's say day 1, you show the kids the funny video, they start laughing, have them take a minute, talk about it, reflect, ask them, what did you notice? What did your body feel like? How did you react to that? And then talk about what strategies did you use to help you, what didn't help you. Have them journal or take some notes on it. And then again, the next day you show them the same video. Maybe they laugh, maybe they're not laughing as hard, and you keep practicing the skill until the child is able to watch it without having any reaction. And then you talk to the kids, make the connection, reflect, and say, what did you notice Or what did you do differently this time? What did you notice about yourself compared to when you look back at your notes from the first time you watched it? Well, the first time I was laughing so silly. This time around, I didn't. Okay, well, how did you stop yourself from laughing? What did you do to help yourself? Like, what strategies did you use? And this is helping teach the students what it means to have control and that they actually can control their response to the reaction of something going on around them. The emotional safe, I love this activity. The idea behind this is kind of like think about a safe. A safe is meant to safeguard things, keep it locked away. So sometimes when you have students, they might come to school and you can tell something's bothering them, or maybe they get upset about something during the school day. But in the moment, they're not ready to talk about it. In the moment, they can't express their feelings. They can't talk about what's going on. And this activity is meant for the child to be able to either write or they can draw about what happened, and then they kind of tuck it away in a safe. So you could use like a shoebox in your classroom, or if you maybe have like a little toy safe, you can put it in there, a treasure chest, whatever it might be. But the child kind of puts it away. And then later, when the child is calm, you revisit it. So then you can go to the safe and take it out, or take it out of the folder or the box, whatever it might be. And now you can talk to them about what it was that they were feeling, why they were feeling that way, maybe what happened, and also game plan and talk about what are some solutions, or what could we do to help you, what's something that can help you kind of navigate that feeling. So again, the book is a great resource, and they have some really awesome resources and reproducibles for you to use with students. So the final category of self-regulation is called cognitive strategies. So this is when we start thinking the higher level kind of abstract thinking skills. And it is important to also keep in mind that depending on your students' cognitive development, it might be difficult for them to handle or take on these types of strategies. So if you have students that maybe have developmental delays or cognitive delays, this might be a little bit harder to kind of grasp some of these skills. But these skills involve critical thinking strategies, self-monitoring strategies. So again, executive functioning, kind of impulse control, inhibition, monitoring your reaction, and then development of insight. So perspective taking skills. What are other people thinking? The idea that feelings and emotions exist just beyond you, right? So for cognitive strategies, the authors talk a lot about sort of the skill sets that one needs to have in order to be able to be critical thinkers and self-monitor. So you need to have the ability to modify your own thoughts. You need to be able to plan how you respond to a situation, process the event that's happening, come up with effective problem-solving solutions to it, but also change your behavior. So how are you going to change the way that you react so that you don't keep repeating the same pattern? So kind of a silly example, but think about recess time. Recess time for students can oftentimes be problematic, right? You have students that maybe disagree, or they may get in a fight, they might get annoyed with somebody, but a really great way to incorporate physical, emotional, and cognitive strategies after recess, when you come back in, have a classroom meeting. This is a great way to build classroom climate, create a family environment, create a safe space for the students. So talking to students about what it means for during recess, what are expected behaviors, revisit your expectations, the guidelines for recess, but also talk to them like, what do you think went well about recess today? What do you think could have been better? What do you think were some problems that we had today at recess? How do you think those impacted other people? How do you think other people felt? What do you guys think are ways that we could make tomorrow an even better day? What can we do differently tomorrow at recess so that we don't have the same problem that we had today? So now not only are you modeling for the students, but you're normalizing feelings. You're allowing students to feel safe to share out and connect with one another. You're building social skills. You're building perspective taking, reflection, what it means to reflect on your day, the positive just as much as the negative. You're talking about things that the students have control over, so we can control how we react or how we play outside during recess. And it's a great way to build some healthy coping tools that are going to be lifelong skills that the students need to be effective and productive in school, at home, and in the workforce. So cognitive strategies, these are again some examples that you'll see in the book. They have activities on called the Defines Trap, Grow a Thought, Magnetic Thoughts, the Domino Effect. So again, if you purchase the book, you'll be able to have all of the reproducibles for these. The problem solving remote control, I love this activity, and I've actually done this before I even knew about the strategy in the book, but there's a great resource that you can also purchase on Amazon, and I'm sure elsewhere too, other maybe bookstores, is called Hunter, and I want to say it's Hunter and the Amazing Remote Control, or Hunter and His Amazing Remote Control, something like that. But I purchased mine on Amazon about 2 years ago, and I use this book all the time with students to talk about kind of self control and growth mindset as well. But in the book, the character uses like a remote control, and he kind of creates his own, where mom helps him realize, when you think about a remote control, you can fast forward. So, kind of in your head, play out the scenario. What do you think is going to happen if you make that choice? Rewind, reflect, kind of what can you do different next time? Pause, take a mindful moment, take a deep breath. And I actually will make a remote control with my students. So we'll make a little remote control booklet where I have a page for each button of the remote control, and the students write down what that button represents. And I make it small enough so that we can laminate it. We'll cut out all the pages, and I get those little metal rings, like the little facets, and we will bind the book and kind of connect it with a metal ring. And sometimes the students will put it around their desks, so it's a visual reminder. Sometimes we'll just use the front cover of the remote control and tape it to their desk so that when they're in the classroom, they have the visual and they can either in their head or physically kind of touch the pretend buttons and use that as a reminder. But that's a great strategy. And again, the book is called Hunter and His Amazing Remote Control, or something around that, or along those lines, and you can purchase it on Amazon. And I'm a huge advocate for books as a strategy to teach students new concepts, and I love in counseling to try as much as possible to incorporate literacy and reading books for students, because sometimes when the spotlight's on them, it's harder for them to be reflective, especially at the younger age. So it's easier sometimes when you kind of don't focus on them, but you use like a book and a character, and then connect, and students can relate and say, oh my gosh, I felt that way too, or that's happened to me before. And now you can problem solve and build some of those cognitive higher level thinking strategies. So kind of reviewing the 3 components of self-regulation, again, we have our physical, emotional, and cognitive strategies. So helping first to teach the students what it means to be physically calm, helping them come up with those skill sets that they can use to calm their body, whether it's using large motor muscle movements or taking space, taking a walk, maybe getting a drink of water, learning how to remove yourself from the situation. So take a hike, as they say in the book. And then you have your emotional strategies, so helping students identify their feelings in a healthy way. So learning that you don't need to scream or yell or throw things, but you can use your words to tell me how you're feeling. I'm feeling outraged, I'm angry, I'm upset, and rate the intensity of those emotions. I'm feeling a level 5 versus a level 1, and the intensity of how they're feeling, that emotion is going to also determine the intensity of the intervention and what strategies they use, and helping them understand that and recognizing that they do have control, and they can calm themselves down and stop themselves from reacting in a negative way that's going to make the size of their problem even worse, right? And then last but not least, cognitive strategies, so higher level thinking skills, being a little bit more reflective, sort of that metacognition, thinking about your own thinking and thinking what can you do different next time so that you don't repeat the same pattern. So just quickly kind of touching upon terms of use, I just want to say again, thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing in this presentation. Again, all of these thoughts that I'm sharing in terms of my own experience, those are my own personal experiences and thoughts that I've had. Of course, they're different for others, and depending on where you work, the population that you work with, the students that you work with. So these are all just based on my own experiences, strategies that I found have been helpful for me, and I'm hoping that maybe they'll be helpful for you. And this book from Chapin and Penner, the Helping Young People Learn Self-Regulation, is a tremendous, tremendous resource. And I promise you, you will not be disappointed. You will not regret purchasing it if you add it to your kind of office library or classroom library for your own resources. But it really is valuable. And this would even be a great, if you have grade level meetings or team meetings, to purchase this book and maybe focus on a section with your team, read through it, and then when you have those team meetings, come together and talk about it, brainstorm, get ideas, maybe create your own list of resources or toolbox strategies that you guys can use with your students as well. So again, thank you for joining me, and I just ask that if you are using this resource that you please don't share out or post or alter the presentation in any way. This is a list of credits, so a lot of the clip art that you see throughout my presentation or resources that I make, I purchase those on Teachers Pay Teachers and also on Etsy. So these are just some of the areas that I purchased some of the clip art on, and sort of their logos that some of you might be familiar with on Teachers Pay Teachers and Etsy. Sarah Pecorino, she's one of my favorites. I love the clip art that she comes up with. And be sure to check out my work. So if you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you found it helpful, I would love if you come follow me on Teachers Pay Teachers. So my Teachers Pay Teachers page is School Psych Manda G. You can also follow me on Instagram, School Psych Manda G as well, where I share a lot of samples of some of my latest social emotional materials that I create. But I also do a lot of book recommendations and kind of share out books that I've come across and have found helpful and useful for counseling or classroom lessons. I give ideas on how you can use the book, some creative activities you can make. I share a lot of counseling resources or calming activities that you can incorporate into your classroom. So definitely check it out and offer some feedback or collaborate with me. I've already met so many amazing people through my school psychology Instagram page, and from all over the country and the world, Australia, England, Spain, Texas, California. So it's been super cool to connect with you guys and share ideas, talk about things like self-care, and share out favorite TV show recommendations and things like that. So definitely come and join the family and check us out. I would love to collaborate and connect with you guys. And on my YouTube channel, I'm new to this, so I apologize if there were any kind of like jumbled parts of this presentation or me stuttering over my words. But again, thank you so much for showing your support and taking the time to watch this presentation. Again, social emotional learning is something that is so important to me, so near and dear to my heart, and I'm so passionate about it. And I hope that through this presentation, you guys maybe took away something, that either a new lens or a new way of thinking about something or a different way to approach a topic, just like self-regulation and focusing on those physical strategies first before you get to the emotional and the cognitive techniques for students. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and let me know what you thought. And I hope everyone has a great day, and good luck for those educators out there as you get ready to kind of venture back to school and the workforce and planning out your curriculum with your students. And my challenge for you guys is to see how can you incorporate social emotional learning into your academic day with your students from the time they walk into the room to the time they exit the room, and collaborate with the parents and the community. So I would love to hear how you guys are doing that. Take care, and I hope everyone stays safe and happy, and have a great afternoon. Bye, guys.